Good morning, Year 3, and welcome to your daily dose of news with me, Miss Panata. Today, climate change activists and those of you who care deeply about the environment will be thrilled to receive some good news. Some unexpected impacts of coronavirus and the lockdown that it has enforced have resulted in a reduction of pollution-related smog in many cities. For example, Sky News has procured some photos of the skylines in the Italian city Milan before and after the lockdown was introduced. You can see that in the right-hand photo, the sky is much clearer and you are able to see into the beautiful distance. The reason for this reduction in smog is most likely due to reduced emissions, as many people are no longer using cars or planes as frequently as they used to. Cars and planes are notorious for releasing fossil fuels that cause a lot of damage to our environment. Let us hope that even after we leave lockdown and go back to our normal lives, people will remember that reducing your use of cars and aeroplanes and other vehicles can have an amazing and powerful impact on our environment. So there's a little news bite from me, and the reason I wanted to talk about the environment and climate change today is because that's a huge theme in the book that we've been studying called Evie in the Jungle. And as we get right into the plot of the story, things are ramping up and getting more exciting. We're going to see some of the problems that are faced by organisations that are trying to stop damage that's being done to some of the most amazing places in our environment. For example, the rainforest, which contains so many wonderful species of animals and plants and provides so many important things for us, not least a lot of the oxygen that we breathe, which comes from the trees in the rainforest. So before we get into this chapter of Evie in the Jungle, which is one of my favourite chapters of the book, let's just go through our pre-lesson checklist. Hello! So today, if you're in the Jade or the Indigo group, you actually got a different video with a slightly different story with Mr. Goodall. He's made it especially for you today, so just go and watch his video. I think it's called Amber Group Video. But if you can't find it, don't worry, you can just click on the link in the description box below. Everybody else, if you're still with me, you should be not in the Jade or the Indigo group. All you need to do is to have a pencil and paper ready, and straight away we're going to write down our date and LI today. So the date is the 5th of May 2020. I've done the short date here, which you can do too. Year 3 reading and grammar. And the LI, we're carrying on our work on inference questions and using examples. So the LI is to use examples to support my point of view in a text. So pause the video now, make sure you've written that down. And if you have pressed play, that means you should have already written your date and title, and you can go ahead and read chapter 7 of Evie in the Jungle on your Kindle app or whichever device that you have that has the book. The chapter is called A Very Grumpy Parrot. It's quite a long chapter, but a lot of interesting things are going to happen in this chapter. So just go ahead, spend 5 to 10 minutes reading through the whole chapter, and only please come back to this video once you've read it. Otherwise, the whole lesson is not going to make any sense to you. So go and read the chapter and then come back and press play. So hopefully you would have noticed that in this chapter, the big event that happens is that Evie goes to the place where Professor Abigail Garcia works and finally gets to meet her hero. You might also remember that right at the beginning of this book, Evie in the Jungle, Evie was actually reading a book written by Professor Abigail Garcia. So a seed that was planted right at the beginning of the story is now coming to fruition in chapter 7. So this is like the main peak of the story at the moment. Today we're going to be focusing just on the beginning section of this chapter because it's such a long chapter. And we're just going to be revisiting some of the work we did last week about answering retrieval questions and inference questions. So let's have a look at the book. Before we answer any questions, I'm going to just take a look and see if there's any really good vocabulary that we can magpie out of this story. So in last week's writing, we already looked at this lovely description of Iquitos city. We've got lots of images here of what it looks like, and there's actually even a small illustration to give us a sense of what the city is like. And we have to remember that the amazing thing about this city is that it's nestled beside the vast curving wonder of the Amazon River. Vast, you should know from your previous dictionary work, means really big. So there's the big fat Amazon River curving, and the city is just right on the edge of that river. And this becomes important when we actually get to the bit where they're about to go across the bridge into the International Centre for Rainforest Protection, which is actually on the bank of the river. If you're not sure what a riverbank is, it's just the name for the bit of grass that sits right next to the river. So if you were to climb out of the river, you would climb onto the bank area. The description of the International Centre for Rainforest Protection has some good words that we could magpie. For example, Evie had imagined the International Centre for Rainforest Protection would be situated in a gleaming skyscraper. A skyscraper is a building that's so tall it almost scrapes the sky. That's why it's called a skyscraper. But this is just a small wooden hut on stilts. Stilts, in case you didn't know, are those type of long wooden poles that sometimes people wear in the circus when they're trying to pretend that they have really long legs. And they can also be a type of support to keep something upright. So there's the hut at the top, and it's on these stilts so that it doesn't get sunk into the river. So it's just above the river. And then there's a section here, once she's gone across the river, of actually what Professor Abigail Garcia's office looks like. It was a small, humid wooden room. Do all of you know what humid means? If you're not really sure, imagine a place that you've been to where it rains a lot, but it's also really hot. Some of you might have been to countries like this, or maybe you just remember a day in London when it was really, really hot, but it had just been raining. Sometimes it still smells of rain and it's quite sticky feeling because the air is full of moisture and water. So humid is like a combination of when it's really hot and really wet. That's what humid means. So when you walk into this room, it would feel really hot. You might not be able to breathe a lot because it's so hot, and it would kind of have a wet feeling in the air. You might find sweat droplets forming on your face from the heat. So we've got a bit of description, and we're just going to go up to, in terms of answering comprehension questions, the bit when Evie first sees Abigail Garcia, who's on the telephone. The types of questions that we're going to be looking at are retrieval questions and inference questions. Now, can you remember the difference between a retrieval question and an inference question? Have a think in your head. What kind of words do we associate with retrieval questions, and what kind of words do we associate with inference questions? Hopefully you should remember that a retrieval question is normally something very factual, okay? It's normally something very obvious and it's easy to find in the story. So if you are given a retrieval question, all you need to do is read the text and you should be able to find the answer quite easily. You shouldn't have to think too much about it, and you don't even really, when you give your answer, need to give an example from the text because the answer is already obvious, okay? So those are the easy to answer questions, so long as you've read properly. The inference questions are a little bit trickier. There will be clues in the text, but they won't be obvious. You'll have to read it very carefully and think about how can you relate the story to the question. Okay, so you're using your skills of deduction, which means you're looking at evidence from the story in order to help you come up with your answer. So let's take a look at a retrieval question first from today's story. So on this side over here, you'll see an example of the type of task you're going to get for today's exercise. And I have two examples of questions. One of them has an R, which means it's a retrieval question, and the other one has an I, which means it's an inference question. So let's have a look at the retrieval question first, because retrieval questions are normally quite easy. It says, why did Evie want to go to the International Centre for Rainforest Protection? So I know at some point in the text it actually tells me why she wanted to go. So I need to find the bit in the text where maybe they're talking about the fact that they're about to go there. Now I know that's after they've explained all about Iquitos City, and I can see, here it says International Centre for Rainforest Protection. So I can see down there that some of the words from the question are in the text, so I'm about in the right place. So let me read that whole paragraph and check to see if it has the answer in it. Evie and her dad had decided to take R the sloth to Professor Abigail Garcia at the International Centre for Rainforest Protection. So all that sentence says is the fact that they're about to go, but it doesn't yet tell me why, so I need to read on further. This had been Evie's idea, because Evie really wanted to meet the author of her favourite book. So that has given us the reason. It said that it was Evie's idea to go, so we know that Evie wanted to go, which is what the question said. And it says because Evie wanted to meet the author of her favourite book. So now when I give my answer, all I need to do is to stick as closely as possible to what it says in the story. So answering in full sentences.
Evie wanted to go to the International Centre for Rainforest Protection because she really wanted to meet the author of her favourite book.
And as usual, where I can give extra details that I know from my own head, I will. And I know that the author of her favourite book was Professor Avril Garcia. So I'm putting that in brackets so that the person marking this question, this answer, knows that I have really understood the story. So that's a retrieval question. I did not need to give an exact example from the text, but I did use information from the text to give the answer because it's a retrieval question. I'm basing my answers on facts that are in the story. Now let's have a look at an inference question. Now this won't be as obvious to answer. It says, why do you think Evie can't take the sloth called R back to England? So I need to find the bit in the story. I know there's a bit where they talk about going back to England. You can see England there. So it said, they'll know what to do with her and it's not like we can take her to England. So that's when they're sort of saying in the story they can't take her back to England. Now I need to say why they couldn't take the sloth back to England. Now it doesn't actually have a because there, it doesn't give an exact reason, but let me read on and see if there's any clues in this part of the story. What is England? Asked R. It's a place without any jungles or wild sloths, said Evie. It sounds terrible, said the sloth. Well, that's a matter of opinion. So what clues can I use in this part of the text to help me with my answer? What could be a reason why they couldn't take the sloth back to England? Well, Evie's given two descriptions of England that the sloth sounds terrible, and that's that there's no jungles in England or wild sloths. So if I use my skills of deduction, maybe that could be a reason why they wouldn't want to take the sloth there, because the sloth would not enjoy being in a place without any jungles or wild sloths. So that's what I'm going to use to give my answer. So remember, we start with I think in inference questions.
I think Evie can't take the sloth called R back to England because there are no jungles there and no wild sloths. So the sloth called R wouldn't enjoy it. Wouldn't like it, maybe.
Now I need to give my reason. Why do I know that the sloth called R wouldn't enjoy it? Remember, I need to use an example directly from the text because it's an inference question. So I can say I know this because we're giving a reason. The sloth called R says it sounds terrible. And you can see I've used inverted commas there to give a quotation from the text. So now I've recapped how to do retrieval and inference questions. I want you to have a go at a few of the questions in the story. So let me read these questions to you now. Question 1. What might have surprised Evie about the International Centre for Rainforest Protection? That's an inference question. Question 2 is a retrieval question. What language is native to Peru? Now, this is a slightly tricky question because of the way it's worded. If you're not sure what native means, then I suggest you look up in a dictionary. Question 3. Why was R very still and careful when Evie was crossing the planks of wood? That's an inference question. Question 4. Now this is a different type of question. It just says, draw a picture of the following scene, including as much visual detail as you can. Visual detail means details you can see in the picture. So you need to look at the words of what is written. It was a small humid room. There was a ceiling fan, but it didn't seem to be working. In the middle of the room was a large desk filled with an old computer and messy paperwork. Beside the desk was a bright red parrot with blue, green and yellow wings sitting on a swing. So use all the information. This is a retrieval question because you're going to be basing your picture on the facts that are given to you in the text. But instead of giving a written answer, you're just going to draw the scene as exactly as you can. So pause the video now and complete your answers to these questions, making sure to answer in full sentences. And when you're done, make sure that you ask a parent or guardian to take a picture of your work and send it in to the Year 3 email address, because I really want to see your drawings and I really want to see if you're getting good at inference and retrieval questions and using examples to support your answers.